the way she had set up her class was so interesting. Like we did, I feel like obviously there's the standards that you have to teach, but there's still some nuance in how you go about it. If at the end of the day, the standard is like seventh graders need to learn how to, create a critical argument or something, or defend an X, Y, and Z, or whatever. She gave us so much latitude into how we did those things. Like as seventh graders, we were debating, abortion rights. We were debating immigration. Yeah, like she allowed us so much. And I think it really just helped me as a person figure out that equity is something that's incredibly important to me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Park Pride Podcast. I'm Dr. Cooper, your Assistant Superintendent of St. Louis Park Schools. And today, with us, joining us on the podcast, we have an alumni of St. Louis Park Schools. We have an alumni at the University of Minnesota, also recognized by Governor Walz for starting the People of PSEO, and the Senior Director of Transformation of KIPP Public Schools, Aaliyah Hodge. Is that right?
That is so right. That is a great introduction. Thank you, Dr. Cooper, for that.
Yes, you've done a lot of great things, and so we're going to get into all of those things today as we have our discussion and talk about advice that you can give to our students here in SLP. But before we go there, tell me about where'd you grow up and tell me about your family.
Oh, yeah. So I actually was born in Brooklyn, New York. And my mom, after 9/11, moved my younger brother and I to Minnesota. So it was completely different. Different community, different, school system, completely different. And since moving from New York in 2001, or maybe 2002, it was 2001. I stayed in the St. Louis Park district since then. So started in third grade with Miss Bramwell, and all the way up to the senior high where I graduated in 2012. And so I like to say, Park really gave me such a strong foundation in which I was really able to, build my skills and continue on this path. I've stayed in education because of the amazing educators that I've met in St. Louis Park. And also, Park gave me the skills to do all of these amazing things that I've been able or been privileged to be able to do. So after I graduated from Park, when I was 19, I got my bachelor's degree from the U of M. And then when I was 21, I had my master's degree from the Humphrey School.
So you moved from New York and you was in third grade.
Yep.
So how did you get adjusted? You said it was pretty tough. What was tough about moving from New York to Minnesota? Because I can relate. I moved from Detroit to Minnesota. So what was the tough things about getting adjusted?
I think it was just a completely different community that I had to get to know. But I was super lucky. I had my third grade teacher, Miss Bramwell. She really, really helped make that transition super smooth. She leaned in and she was very good at encouraging me. I'm a super introvert. So she was very good at encouraging me to grow a group of friends, and things like that. And also she really pushed me as a teacher. She saw right away that I wasn't being challenged enough. And she pushed me to be in gifted and talented as well as math challenge. She didn't wait until the next school year. She was like, no, this is something that I want you to do within the school year. And I feel like her fast acting decisions really shifted my academic arc.
And what school was that?
This was Cedar Manor. I think it's now a French immersion school, but this was Cedar Manor. So this is 2003. So this is a while ago.
So Cedar Manor, I've actually had a chance. So as I'm new here to the district, is Park Spanish Immersion. They've taken that building because when you go inside, you still see the plaque that says Cedar Manor.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So so you came here and started at Cedar Manor, third grade. A little bit more about your family. How many siblings do you have? All of that.
Yeah, no. I have one younger brother who also went to Park. He started in Aquila. So he started from kindergarten all the way through high school. So I've got one younger brother. He is 4.5 years younger than me. He had a similar education background. We both did PSEO. he now works at Ed Trust in like the comm space. We're both in education. I think that's a testament to just our great schooling. We grew up with our mom. I think so. Just a couple things. I guess my mom, she was really the person who drilled into my brother and I that education really was
Hmm.
the key to opportunity. My mom herself, she was undocumented for much of my childhood. And I think based on those experiences, she really pushed Josh and I to really focus on school and see that as a way to, break down those, systemic barriers and things like that.
Mm. I always believe that when it comes to having that village or that community around you, and your parents, you talked about you had a great third grade teacher, but even like your mom and how influential that is in making sure that education is like number one. I remember
Yes.
for me, my mom and dad, they were focused on our education, and that was so important that they would say every day, learn all you can, and that's something
Mm.
that just kind of sticks, with me to this day. So knowing how hard your mom worked and making sure education was first, what is something that you take from those times with your mom and family? What is something that you take from those times that has carried you till today?
Oh, there's so many things. I feel like as I'm saying, as an adult now, but I feel like I go back to some of like just the things that my mom used to always instill in us. So like even now when like I feel incredibly overwhelmed or stressed, like there's certain things that like just echo in my head. One of them is always she used to always say when she saw me like struggling with a project or something at school, she'd always be like, Aaliyah, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So even now, working on complicated progress projects and things like that, like, I think it just gives me an opportunity to step back and say, okay, how can I break this up into smaller pieces? And that just is so helpful. I think she has taught me and my brother grit and persistence,
Mm,
understanding that things aren't always going to be perfect. And, it's not, everyone deals with setbacks and it's really how you adjust to that that defines you. Um, she used to always say, I don't care about the storm. I care about if you brought the boat in. That was
mm.
her thing. And like she also had some like mom tendencies too. Her big thing was like every time we took a test and like we weren't getting 100%, she'd be like, "Where's the other 2%? Where's the other 5%?" She held that bar incredibly high, and I think honestly, without her, I would not be here. And so
Mm.
I owe so much to, her determination and her seeing better for my brother and I.
Mm. I did this while you were talking, or a lot of
Mm.
times I do this. It's an elementary thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
connection. Same there. What a lot of surgery was saying. But that's so important. It's about you had those high expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about those high expectations, tell me like more, because obviously your third grade teacher leaned into you and pushed you out of your comfort zone. What are some other memorable, mentors or teachers you had here in St. Louis Park Public Schools?
Oh man, there's so many. There's so many. There's actually so many, and I think that is such that's just such a testament to Park. I think Mr. Adams, he was my fifth grade teacher. I don't think he's at the district anymore. He was actually one of my only Black male educators that I ever had. So one, seeing myself represented in that way mattered deeply.
Yes.
He also was instrumental in like helping my mom navigate the system. And so one of the things that he pushed me um, into doing is in my sixth grade year, instead of doing math at my sixth grade classroom, I actually went to the junior high and I took math classes there. And so he was really instrumental in telling my mom, like, hey, this is how you figure this out. This is, she's got to score XYZ on the NWA and like all of that good stuff. And so he helped, also accelerate me. I
Oh,
think Miss
oh, but
Sumberg.
now,
Hmm?
now, now, before you go to your
Yeah,
next
yeah.
mentor, but let's dig into this. So you took a class. So sixth grade was still elementary at the time.
Yep.
Okay, not to tell your age, but back then sixth grade was still elementary. So you would you would go and then go somewhere else. How did that make you feel? What did that do for your confidence? To be like, I'm going over to the middle school to take class.
To be honest, I felt like it took me a while. I was very like imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm with all the older kids. Like they know that I'm a sixth grader and then they're all sevies and like, and my mom used to always tell me, it is, there is so much that you can teach anyone in every space that you're in. So don't ever sit there and shrink yourself or feel like you don't belong. And so I think that really helped me when I think about all of the honors classes, the AP classes, and even moving on to PSEO sort of classes, where sometimes I was, not only one of the only students of color, but like, sometimes I was like the youngest person in that space too. And so I think, that just really helped me build my confidence. But we had a really great cohort. It was like me and a group of other students that I had always known from like GT and Math Challenge. And, it was great. We honestly took those accelerated math classes all the way together. Like we were in 10th grade and we were taking AP Calc, that's another Mr. Alquist. I don't know if he's still
Okay.
at Park, but that class tested me. It taught me that was the class that taught me grit and persistence, and it taught me like, hey, you are capable. You just have to think differently. It pushed me in ways that I had not been pushed at school before. And so I shout out Mr. Alquist all the time. My mom and him had the best relationship. I also think that's like an important thing. Just parent involvement. My mom was always incredibly active in my education. She'd always come to the conferences. She dragged me to the conferences. Her big thing was like, anything they say in front of me, you need to hear it too.
Mm-hmm.
So she was always there. She always would call my teachers just to like, check in, how's Aaliyah doing and things like that. Yeah.
A lot of things that you're saying is it ties directly. We had a keynote speaker.
Mm,
His name was Jeff Main. He shared a story about his second grade teacher and how he invited his teacher to church. And the teacher showed up, and his mom and the teacher had this special relationship, and you
mhm.
could see the power of relationships when you see
Yes,
that partnership between the teacher and the parent. So yeah, they were pushing you, but you also couldn't get away with nothing as well.
exactly.
so,
She
so
wouldn't let me. She wouldn't let me. And I think so obviously I had Ms. Umberg who really, she was my seventh grade teacher or seventh and eighth grade teacher, English language arts. I highlight her because one, I still talk to her even today. And I think the way she had set up her class was so interesting. Like we did, I feel like obviously there's the standards that you have to teach, but there's still some nuance in how you go about it. If at the end of the day, the standard is like seventh graders need to learn how to create a critical argument or something or defend an X, Y, and Z or whatever. She gave us so much latitude into how we did those things. Like as
mm,
seventh graders, we were debating, abortion rights. We were debating
wow.
immigration. Yeah, like she allowed us so much. And I think it really just helped me as a person figure out that equity is something that's incredibly important to me. And then I have to shout out Mr. Brubaker, who was my ninth grade. I think he did like honor civics. I don't know if he's at the district anymore, but he is the reason I got into policy work. Like
Wow.
literally, the mock Senate, and I feel like he just consistently pushed my way of thinking. And I used to get so passionate in class. I'd like argue and debate, and he would never be like, "Okay, calm down, Aaliyah." He'd feed into it. He'd be like, "Absolutely." Like he'd encourage that, and so I feel like I have been so blessed by having so many teachers and adults who've really poured into me, which is really why I am so happy to be in this space now.
Well, tell me a little bit more. You said you was passionate. Can you tell me of a time when you was really passionate about a topic or debate that that you remember to this day, that a moment in class?
I think we were having a debate. It was when I was in ninth grade. It was Obama's first presidency,
Okay.
and so we were having a debate on. I think it was like voting fraud, which is, I guess, still a thing or still things that people like to pontificate about. And it was on like making sure that everyone has IDs or something. And I remember, being there and complaining and being like, well, the lines are too long in some of these places. Some people have to go for hours and pull, like blah blah blah. And I remember a student like said something that was like completely, it was fine. We all know our specific lives and we all know, that's our vantage that we work from. And I was just like, I seized on it. And then Brubaker was like, I need you to calm down. Like there's a different way to address your point. And like, the amount of kindness and like how he redirected my energy was just great. So I think his daughter is like a Spanish teacher, Lydia, at the high school, but yeah.
Now, you was getting ready to say something about a sixth grade teacher. Did you
Mm,
mention? I want you to make sure you put that name out there too. You said someone you had a
yeah,
sixth grade. Yeah.
yeah. So it was seventh grade, Zumberg, and then I also had another seventh grade teacher, Miss Gibson, who was social studies. So I've always been kind of in like the whole humanities, um, like I guess, part of schooling, even though like math was always my strong suit. But Miss Gibson, she was just an amazing teacher. She and my mom had the best relationship. I think even after I graduated from the middle school, I used to come back and volunteer in her classroom
Wow.
because like I just thought she was a great teacher. I thought the way she taught geography was just so cool. Like I felt
What
like
was
I
it
know
that was so what was so cool about it?
we had I remember when we were learning the countries across the world, and she had like specific songs. Like I literally can still remember some of those songs right now, and they just stick so much. And like they really taught us like, okay, like this is where Mongolia is, this is where China is, this is where Indonesia, like, and like she had songs for everything that just really helped things stick. She also
Do
had a
you
really
remember? Do you remember one of the songs?
um I know like a little bit. It was like
Give it. I want to hear it. I want to hear
It
it.
was like it was like to the I don't even know what the song like background was, but it was like Mongolia, all the people are in China. North Korea with this many people. Now South Korea, like democratic, North Korea, like we had like an actual song. And she was hilarious. She had like a reputation for like eating kids' homework if they were doing it in class. And I thought that was just hilarious. Yeah, I've had lots. Oh, and the last one, Miss Stevens. I forgot about Miss Stevens, Dr. Stevens. She was not my like a core class teacher. She was like, I guess, part of like the admin or like guidance counseling support team. um but when I did PSEO at the U of M, and I didn't have a computer at my house. And so sometimes I would come into the high school so that I could use the computers, and she'd always allow me to use the computers in her office. And so, like, in a way, she was, quietly breaking down barriers for me, because I would not have, been able to do my work. Um,
Well, let's go into the PSCO. It seemed like
mm,
that was so impactful in your life and what you do today. How did you get involved in it and your experience?
yeah. So I think it was my mom. She's everything. It
Look
starts
at
with
that.
her. It was actually not a program that I initially wanted to do. She had looked at it. She was saying when I was, as a 10th grader, rising 11th grader or whatever, um, I'd always known that I wanted to go to college, but we didn't know how we would pay for it. And so PSEO obviously is a program that lets 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students attend college level courses on a college campus without any cost to them. And so when I was actually exploring the program, I was weighing a lot of different things. I was already in AP, I was already taking IB classes. And I was also weighing the the high school experience. I was like, I don't want to leave my friends. Um, Half of it I didn't really have a choice. My mom was like, that's too bad. um, but I think it was one of the best decisions that I made. I think um, being able to advocate for myself in that space, because I did decide ultimately that this is something that I wanted to do. Um, and so I had to do the research. I had to figure out which school I wanted to go to. And so I had looked at both the U of M and I had also looked at MCTC, mainly because like they were close to my house, they were transit accessible, and things like that. And it opened a world to me that I didn't think was initially for me. And so my first year, I did part-time PSEO when I was in 11th grade. And so I did English, and there was some sort of social studies. I think it was 8 push, maybe. I'm trying to remember. Um, in the morning, and then I went to the U of M in the afternoon. And so I took, I think, 15 credits, and they were like, your typical math. I had to hit my high school requirements first, but I think after when I was in my senior year, I did PSEO full time, and then I was able to take classes like the ones that I really liked, like Japanese. I ended up minoring in Japanese.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I've been to Japan, and that's been great. I also took ASL, and like I use sign language all the time, which is kind of weird. Only because in DC we have Gallaudet University, which is like the big deaf university, and so it's not actually too far from my house, and so I definitely use it in everyday life. And then I was able to like really dive deep in on policy. So my love has always been looking at the welfare state, systems and policies designed to mitigate risk for the most needy folks. And so through that is really why I focus on education. So it wasn't until grad school that I really focused deeply on education policy and specifically charter schools. But because of PSEO, I think it really gave me the opportunity to not only see a broad range of subjects, but also to go really deep into the policy work that I loved. Um,
So as you talk about
yeah.
PSEO, tell me a little bit more about how much you saved for college.
Oh, yeah, it's actually crazy. So I had graduated from high school with 58 college credits from the U of M. So that's 2 years completely paid for at the U of M. And so, I mean, the math is probably like 50,000 or something. I don't know how much
Wow.
a year goes for. And it saves you so much time. And I needed that time because I didn't have the time. My family didn't have a ton of money. And so I needed to be in the workforce and making some money to support my family as soon as possible. And so I think from my PSEO experience and then after graduating grad school, I had always been in the ed space with like some ed advocacy folks. And, one of them, Joe Nathan, who actually helped write the charter law in Minnesota, he said, "Hey, I'm interested in starting a PSC organization." And I was like, "Hey, I'm only interested in joining if I can run it." And the
Wow.
rest was like literally, as a 23-year-old, I was very bold. I did not know how much work I was signing up for, but it's all been great. So I was the president of People for PSEO for 4 years before I moved to DC. The organization still exists right now. They've still continued to do advocacy work. And so in my first year as president, we got a couple of bills passed. Specifically around making sure that students had accurate, up-to-date PSEO information. So that's something that we had found out from a lot of students that they just didn't know what PSEO was, and there wasn't anywhere for them to go to for that information. And so there's definitely still things that are in the program that we haven't yet nailed down. Like, for example, the transportation reimbursement is still tied to the 1985 rate, and so it hasn't been
Mm.
updated for inflation, which is obviously has a chilling effect for students who are low income. The other thing that I know People for PSEO is really pushing hard for is also when students who receive free and reduced price lunch, they can eat at their high school, but those funds don't translate to their college campuses. And so that obviously also has a chilling effect on who attends PSEO or the students who would enroll, because it's hard to choose between school and food. Like
Yeah.
that's a very difficult decision. And we've been very blessed to be able to work with the Walls administration, and they've been incredibly supportive of our work. Um,
So
so yeah,
tell me more about how you got recognized. You was recognized by Governor Walz. Talk about that experience.
I mean, it was a pretty powerful experience. So we had worked with then Commissioner Ricker a while ago now, and we had done a lot of work in bringing students forward to talk about their experience with PSEO and how it's changed their lives and opened doors for them, and then also to hear about all of the things that we can do to improve the program. Um, and I feel like Governor Walz is really big on education and students. And I think it just really resonated with him, the work that we were doing. And we had like a big day on the Hill event where we had Senator Carlin Nelson and a bunch of other senators just speak and like share why this program should be protected and things like that. So yeah, it was incredibly humbling to, you know, do the work and then someone recognizes that like, hey, this is making an impact in other people's lives.
I bet that moment had to feel encouraging, empowered, that if you're able to do that, and
Mm,
what you say you was just getting out of college, 23.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, what does that make you feel at that point? And how does it carry on?
I mean, literally, I was just I feel like at the time I didn't have the ability to stop and be like, oh, okay, this is amazing,
Hmm.
because I felt like I was doing so much in Minnesota. I also I think right after that, maybe no, like 3 years after that, I actually chaired the ethnic studies committee for the social studies state standards too. So like, you know, it was like a constant like one thing, next thing, next thing. And so I didn't really have the opportunity to sit there and be like, oh, wow, this is actually powerful work. But I knew we were doing or making a difference because you'd hear it from our students. Students who even nowadays come back to me and say like, hey, I so appreciate being part of People for PSEO. And I think one thing that made us super different or innovative is that we were youth run. And so that didn't mean that we just had youth on committees. That meant that as a 23-year-old, I was the president of the organization, that we literally hired a 17-year-old executive director. Yeah. So we were incredibly youth run. And that was the point. That was by design because I felt that no better per people to talk to senators and representatives about the lived experience of PSEO students and the students themselves. And so, I mean, a lot of the work also had to do with like coaching students and like making sure that they knew like, hey, these are our talking points. This is how you present yourself when you know, are out in the field and things like that. But I think that model was just incredibly different and not something I had seen in other organizations, you know?
You mentioned something back when you were third grade about representation matters. Or was it fifth grade? Might have been fifth grade.
It was fifth grade. Yep.
Fifth
Good
grade
memory.
about representation matters. And I just hope you understand and realize the impact that your representation has as you was 23, being the president of PSEO, People for PSEO. Think
Mm.
about how that impact is and how it's full circle and the people that you affected. Are you still in touch with people at the PSEO and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So they are actually in the process of getting a new executive director, and so I've been leaning in on that. I still talk to Zeke, who was our first executive director. I'm still very much in that space. I think there was recently an article that Khalik Rogers from the Catalyst for Systems Change, he, myself, and Zeke kind of all work together on like how important PSEO is still, almost 40 years after the law was passed, 35 years after the law was passed. Um, and so, yes, absolutely, I still talk to everyone. Yeah.
so now you're passing that over. Tell us about now the KIPP charter school and how did you get out to DC? So tell us about that.
Yeah. So after grad school, I actually started my like career, I guess, as a sixth grade teacher. I taught special ed at a charter school in Minnesota, Harvest Network of Schools. I guess it was Best Academy at the time, and
Mhm.
I don't know what they're called now. Um, And so after that, I also was a charter school authorizer for a couple of years. And then I moved to DC mainly because my brother was going to grad school at Howard. And, you know, we're incredibly close. And, you know, we were like, there's no way we can live in a different city from each other.
Oh wow,
And so,
that's special.
no, no, like super close. We have matching tattoos. And my first role at KIPP DC was related to COVID recovery. So my role was to manage about $60 million in federal funding related to, you know, CARES ESSER 2 and obviously, you know, ESSER 3. Um, and I that role was incredibly difficult. It stretched me so much as a person. And so not only was my role to make sure that our investments post-pandemic were the right levers. And so my strategy really focused on a couple of things. The first one was making sure that the schools were safe. So that means all of that enhanced cleaning, all of that tests and screenings for kids. And part of that was also vaccinations. And so I had worked with Children's National and Mayor Bowser's office to kind of upstand a vaccination campaign across our 8 different campuses in the city. And we ended up administering over 1,100 vaccinations to
Wow.
students, families, teachers, community members. And so that was really great. And we had to do a lot of work related to vaccination hesitancy too. So one, it was making sure that schools were safe. The other key tenet of my work was accelerating learning. And so a lot of that looked like high impact tutoring and making sure that we were making investments in both in school time as well as out of school time, because there's been so much research that says like what kids do out of school also incredibly is important. And so we launched Camp KIPP DC with some of those ESSER funds. And then a big chunk of the money was used for technology and staffing. We increased, each classroom had 2 lead teachers. And then on top of that, all kids had a device for learning both at school and at home. And
Wow.
so it was a lot of work, but it was just such an amazing opportunity. And then I also was able to like focus on some really important work that was important to me too during that time. And so, for example, some of our recovery funds were earmarked for specific populations, one of them being students who are homeless and highly mobile. And as someone who dealt with some housing insecurity, that was something that was really important to me. And so we invested in our students who were housing insecure by one, making sure that at the beginning of the school year, they all had like backpacks with supplies, as well as like literacy and math materials based on their specific grade level. And so that was a work and a coordinated effort. And so we did that. We also made sure that all of our kids had coats for the wintertime. I know it doesn't get as cold in DC as in Minnesota, but like we still need our coats
I,
here.
I
And
get
then
it. It's 50 degrees outside. You need a coat. I got it.
exactly. And then there was 2 other campaigns. And so one was Thanksgiving, to make sure that all students had like a Thanksgiving meal. I had gone to, as myself growing up, gone to food pantries where they give you like the box mac and cheese. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. I want us to have noodles. I want shredded cheese for all the kids. I want the gravy. We gave out turkeys. We gave out pies. And so like
Wow.
every student got that. And then we also, because spring break is a gap in which kids don't get, kids who might need school lunch, they don't get lunch. We also created a whole like a food delivery box for students then too. And so that was some of the most, it was incredibly difficult to coordinate across a bunch of different agencies, but like that was the work that I loved because you could see it when you had parents come and grab their Thanksgiving box, just the way they looked, and you knew that you were doing something that was so important. Um, and then I moved to my role at KIPP DC changed every single year, kind of.
Okay.
Every time they were like, "Oh, we can plug Aaliyah in here," and so I ended at KIPP DC doing a lot of strategy work. Like we had big priorities that were pretty cross functional, and it was my role to make sure those got implemented. And so at the KIPP Foundation, it's super similar. One KIPP is a set of nationwide priorities that we've rolled out to regions, and so my job is to really project manage and change manage, and support with change management to make sure that these are actually implemented in fidelity, so that we do get those great outcomes for our kids.
Okay. So you have once again have a passion for helping others, setting things up. What do you do for yourself? What's your hobby? What's your self-care?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question because I'm not just a work robot. Um, so I love Pilates. Like I love solid core. I try and go at least 3 or 4 times a week. It's like my quiet time. It is like we don't have a lot of times where we're completely unplugged and completely just focusing on ourselves, and that is my quiet time. Um, I also love baking. I make the best chocolate chip cookies. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I do. Um,
Let me tell you something. That's my favorite chocolate chip cookie. So
well, I'll have to send you the recipe. It's so
yeah.
extra. It's like there is nothing I love more than like on a Sunday afternoon taking 2 or 3 hours and like breaking down a recipe and figuring out all the tweaks to it. Um, I love traveling. I actually just came back from Minnesota like 2 weeks ago for the state fair. And so that was always a great time. And prior to that, before I started this new role at the foundation, I went to Venice and Rome just to like
Wow.
recenter before this new opportunity. So yeah, I try and balance both work and fun. But education and equity work is really my heart, and so it doesn't really always feel like work.
I'm glad you said that because a lot of times people can talk about balance and all of that, but you know, balance is tough, right? Because when your passion is going to drive you, what you love to do is always going to be the thing that just leads you. But I'm glad you did mention you do take those times to say,
Oh yeah.
hey, let me go to the state fair and all of that. What was your go-to at the state fair?
I always get a pronto pup. I love
Pronto
a
pup.
pronto pup. Yeah, I love a pronto pup, and Andy's Grill has great drinks, so I'll
You,
make
you,
sure to
you,
go there.
you don't do Sweet Martha's cookies?
I don't because I make better chocolate chip cookies. I know I'm going to Minnesota jail. I
Wow.
know, I know. Like every time I go, I'm always like, these are like Toll House cookies. Yes, I say that. I know I'm a bad Minnesotan.
Well, just a couple more questions. One question I have is that what an experience you've had going through St. Louis Park schools and from elementary to high school. What is something you would go back and tell yourself now that you look back? What would you tell yourself? What's
Take up
a
space.
piece of advice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I think what I would tell myself, I feel like as I've gotten older, I've definitely censored myself less. I believe it's so important to show up as your full authentic self. And so that's what I would tell young Aaliyah. I would tell her, do not be afraid to take up space. You do not benefit anyone by shrinking who you are. And so that's something that I will always tell any student that I interact with. Show up as your authentic self.
Hmm.
You at the end of the day, you need to live with yourself and your decisions. And so you need to be proud of who you are. We're not, for anyone else, it's for you.
I love that. I love that. I always tell kids that previously when I was a principal, I would
Mm,
always make sure that I wanted students to show up who they are.
yep.
Whether, we would always celebrate cultures, show up in your dress, your language, food.
Hmm.
Don't feel like you have to come into a space and be something that you're not to fit in.
Hmm. Yep.
Because everyone makes that space and makes it important. And that's what makes, our district in St. Louis Park is the diversity and the richness
Yep.
that's there. So show up and be who you are. Okay, I know you received this. It's a sin. It's our portrait of a learner here.
Yes.
So our portrait of a learner here is how we empower our students and what we want our learners to be. We want them to be authentic, strategic, connectors, empowered, nimble, dreamers. And that's our portrait of a learner here. So as you look at this and you had a chance to look at that,
Mm.
what is one way you would like to see our current students supported to ascend into the future like you have?
Yeah, no, I think one of the ways, one thing that I think about in terms of a portrait of, I think strategic is one of them. I think I will always say that Park trained me to think critically and creatively. Like I had mentioned before in Ms. Dunberg's class, we weren't just writing essays. We were dissecting immigration. We were looking at gay rights. We were talking about abortion as seventh graders. And I think that early push to analyze those big complex problems and kind of generate creative solutions or, discourse, is really what set me up for success. Set me up for success not only in, college, but also now leading, national transformation projects where both strategy and innovation are pretty critical. So definitely double down on the strategic thinking and the systems level thinking.
Wow. Well, I thank you for those words. We're going to make sure that our kids and our team here hears that. That's so powerful. I mean, St. Louis Park is so proud of
Mm.
what you've done and what you've accomplished, and you still got so much. I mean, you have what's next? What's next for Aaliyah?
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I am enjoying this new role at the KIPP Foundation. I am hoping to continue to grow my skills as an education leader, and we will see. I When I was younger, I really had wanted to be a superintendent. So we'll still see. Well,
Okay.
actually, my goal was the commissioner of education. Like I know that's even great. Not the commissioner of education. Yeah, it was the
Yes.
commissioner of
Yeah.
education. Yeah, so that was my goal, and so
You gonna
we'll
come back
see
to
how we
Minnesota
go.
and do it?
I would absolutely, because that is my community, and I feel like regardless of where I go, Park and Minnesota are always going to be home. You know?
Wow. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Just remarkable of all the work you've done. So St. Louis Park is proud, and also I know your mom. Your mom
Mm.
has to be so proud and the things that you've done and your family and your brothers. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the good
Mm.
work. Continue to ascend. And I thank you for sharing your story and your time, Aaliyah.
No, thank you, Dr. Cooper. Thank you.